Good evening, black people and all allies fighting for black liberation, black prosperity, and black joy. I'm Charles Blow, and welcome to Prime. While all eyes were on Michigan today, where the president visited to push his economic agenda, many of us were left wondering if we might have missed the other agenda he promised back in June when he said he'd travel the country to push for voting rights. Did we miss it? Did this happen already? No, it did not. Instead, the president pitched his infrastructure and spending bills in Michigan today as talks in Washington have now stalled. He warned that without his twin economic packages, we're at risk of losing our edge as a country. Hours after the new John Lewis voting rights bill was introduced in the Senate earlier today, the president did post this tweet writing, "We're facing a relentless attack on the sacred right to vote across the country, and we need to act. I'm glad to see the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act introduced in the Senate to ensure every American can make their voice heard at the ballot box. I urge its passage." And Vice President Kamala Harris also gave this statement. Take a listen.
Congressman John Lewis is an American hero. I had the privilege of walking with him across the Edmund Pettus Bridge, including the last time that he was there. Let us remember his courage and his contribution to strengthening America's democracy. And in his honor, let us pass the John Lewis Voting Rights Act, as well as the Freedom to Vote Act, to make it easier, not more difficult, for people to vote in America.
The Senate Judiciary Committee will hold a hearing on the bill tomorrow, which supporters say would strengthen key parts of the 1965 Voting Rights Act. All that as the number of anti-voting laws sweeping the country continues. According to the Brennan Center, which calls this an unprecedented year for voting legislation, at least 19 states have now enacted 33 laws that make it more difficult for you to vote. That's up from 14 states in May. Attorney General Merrick Garland said yesterday that the Justice Department is seriously and urgently investigating how states are changing voting procedures or redistricting, but is that enough? Ben Jealous and others were arrested at the White House earlier today, while he and members of other voting rights groups urged the president to stop delaying and pass voting rights now. Joining me now is Markus Batchelor, the Deputy Director of Leadership Programs at People for the American Way. Tell us, Markus, what happened today outside in front of the White House and how Ben Jealous was arrested and is still apparently in custody hours after his arrest.
Yeah, thanks, Charles, for having me. And what you saw today was a demonstration of our commitment to the president. We showed up in August and said that he needed to act more firmly to affirm our right to vote, to say that the Senate needed to either nix or fix the filibuster in order to pass bold voting rights legislation that protects all of our rights to vote and beats back the attacks that we're seeing on states across the country this year. So we came back to the White House just like we had in August, but escalated our ask. And so what the nation saw today, what you saw today, was a demonstration of that. Ben, our president at People for the American Way, as well as 4 other folks representing civil rights organizations and clergy organizations across the country, put their bodies on the line to say that we know that, Joe Biden has to be more than I urge its passage president. He has to really step in and use his 40 years of experience in the Senate to do what's right for the American people. And first and foremost, before infrastructure, before all of those things we clearly need to make progress on, the only way we do that is if we secure every American's right to vote. And that's what we went to demand that the president do more forcefully today.
Joining the discussion is Virginia Kase Solomón, the CEO of the League of Women Voters. Virginia, it is clear to everyone who's paying any attention that the Biden administration's priority is this economic package. But what is the danger in putting all of the eggs in that basket, at least front-loading all of the energy into that basket and delaying or not putting enough energy into the fight to protect people's right to vote?
Well, thank you for having me. And I will say that right now we are at a pivotal moment for our democracy. Everybody knows this. The president knows this. He is trying to have an FDR moment when in reality, he has the opportunity to have an FDR moment and an LBJ moment. He can use the power of his bully pulpit to move both pieces of legislation along. There is no reason why the president can't walk and chew gum at the same time. And so that's why we were here today. And we believe that he can do it.
So, Marcus, I just want to ask you, do you believe that there will be time left, right? So let's assume that the infrastructure and the spending bills take up a month or so of time. Do you think that he'll have time to pivot after whatever happens with those bills to deal with voting rights, to put more energy into it after that? Or will the midterms simply take over and no one will be willing to take tough votes because they'll be coming up on an election?
Yeah, well, what we're asking the president to do is walk and chew gum at the same time, right? A president has to deal with many different issues at the same time. And we believe that as fervently as he's advocating for the infrastructure, the roads and bridges that power our economy, he can also invest in the infrastructure of our democracy. He ran saying that he wanted to bring the country together to restore faith in our institutions. And if he sees after an election where folks work their tails off to produce record turnout to get him into office, and he lets 19 states so far infringe on the right to vote of mostly poor folks and people of color, that is a blow to the promises that he made to the American people. And so we want him to work right now to do those things. I mean, you mentioning the 19 states that have already passed these pieces of legislation, critical deadlines are already elapsing, right? There are Republican legislatures around the country who already have census data that allows them to redraw their districts so that they can choose their voters and not the other way around. We are really at a critical deadline, and so many of these critical deadlines are elapsing while the Senate really just sits on his hands. And so we need the president to step in right now, because now time is of the essence. We can't wait another month or another 2 months. It really does take him to take action now and do more than one thing at once.
Virginia, I want to get your assessment of the new stripped down voting rights bill. Undoubtedly, there are good things in it, making, the election day, federal holiday, and the like. And it does roll back some things that people are doing in the states, but not all. There are real provisions in some of these bills that are not at all tackled by this federal legislation. Some things like the law here in Georgia, which allows the state to take over local election boards. That's not covered by this law as best I can tell. What is your assessment of the law and how good it can be in terms of fighting against these oppressive laws being passed across the country in all these states?
Well,
Yeah,
federal legislation can only do but so much. I mean, and the reality is we like to call the Freedom to Vote Act the sword, and we like to call the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act the shield. Both need to work together in order to protect voters and advance voting rights. But we know these two pieces of legislation alone are not enough. I also want to say that we need to be vigilant in watching what is happening in states right now. We know we can't fix everything, but voters should have a uniform experience. And quite frankly, after the Voting Rights Act was gutted, and we knew that we were going to be facing insurmountable challenges if we didn't have these protections replaced. And so I am hopeful that while it doesn't give us everything that we wanted, what it will do is allow us to have some kind of recourse. Our organization had to file more than 70 lawsuits last year in 2020 to protect voting rights. We don't want to have to go through this once again in 2022. We have a midterm upon us. And so I just want to go back and press the importance of getting this legislation passed now, because at least we will ensure that voters have a uniform voting experience and they will have the protections that they need. No, it's not a fix all, but democracy is in peril right now. And so those most critical pieces, we know that, if a house is on fire, we're getting the water on the house. We're not worried about the shed in the back. And so we need to make sure that we get the house under control now so that we can focus on those other pieces that still need fixing and be vigilant in the states.
Marcus, you were mentioning earlier about redistricting, which I think is, a huge part of this that we don't even talk as much about, but that is just now getting started. Texas just redrew its districts basically to increase the number of Republican districts, decrease the number of minority and Democratic districts, even though 95% of the growth in Texas came from people of color. How do you consider this, what is going to happen with the redistricting in all of these states that are led by Republicans?
Yeah, well, what we need to do is beat back efforts that really make it possible for Republicans to redraw those maps, not just in state legislatures, but for congressional districts as well. The unfortunate reality now is that over 20 state legislators are now controlled by a Republican House of Delegates, a Republican Senate, and a Republican governor's mansion. And so those efforts do have to be preempted from the federal level, which is why we're so fervently in favor of making sure that we pass legislation like the Freedom to Vote Act and the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act that actually give the federal government the tools to preempt efforts at the state level in states that have a history of suppressing the vote of people of color, of women, of marginalized groups across the country and across their state. And so that's why we need the president to step in, because it's critically important that we have those federal protections in place where the Republicans are running amok at the state level.
Markus Batchelor and Virginia Kase Solomón, thank you both for joining me tonight. I really appreciate it.